Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to What Do You Say, where we talk to remarkable individuals from all walks of life. I'm your co-host, Andrew Termini. If you like what my brother Frank and I are doing here, please like, subscribe, and leave us a review. And remember to hit that notifications button so you can be notified every time we upload some new content. Our next guest has a truly inspiring story. She's a devoted Christian, loving mother, and a cherished friend. Her life is a testament to transformation and unwavering faith. Her early years were marked by challenges, struggling with addiction at the age of 11 to her early 20s. And remarkably, it was during a period of incarceration that she surrendered her life to Jesus, leading her on the unexpected path of full-time ministry. Shortly after stepping into full-time ministry, she lost her husband to COVID. She has remained steadfast, crediting God's faithfulness through every twist and turn. And she emphasizes the profound lessons learned through grief, suffering, and she considers them a gift entrusted to her by God. She currently works as the head of connections and volunteer director at the Rock of KC Christian Church, and her mantra revolves around loving God entirely, fostering a deep connection with people, and serving the world generously with her time, talents, and treasures. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Devon Hampson to What Do You Say?
Welcome to What Do You Say, the podcast that peels back the layers of remarkable individuals to reveal their extraordinary sides and their incredible lives. I'm your host, Frank Termini, and I'm absolutely thrilled to embark on this journey with you. The podcast name's What Do You Say? But that's not how it's said.
How do you say it?
We say.
What do you say?
We say.
What do you say?
We say.
What do you say?
You got it. We say.
Hey.
Whenever you say that, do you ever just think of Dad?
Yeah,
Every single time.
that's how the name came about. We were trying to figure out how to name it. My dad always used to go, when he'd go up and see somebody, he'd say, "Hey, we say." And so,
It was like that whole generation of guys, though. I mean, all of his friends did it. I mean,
yeah. And so now I think now that, you know, we've named the podcast this, I get people coming up to me all the time going, "Hey, we say."
Awesome. So this is like a replacement for like, what's up?
Yeah.
Okay.
very similar.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very similar. It's a way to greet someone.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
But you have to-
arbitrary.
You have to slur all those words together.
Well, yeah,
You're not
because
enunciating what do you say, it's what you say.
We say, well, because
Is that all right?
and I wanted to name it that way, and he was like, "You can't. No one will be able to find the podcast that
You
way."
can't spell it that way because then they'll try to look for it and they'll never be able to find it. So,
Right.
But I'm glad the way that you and Dane decided to figure that out and to way to explain it.
Because
brilliant.
I was just in his office, and they like record everything. As soon as you walk in, everything's getting recorded, you know. And so, and it just came out that way.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was just explaining it to Ricky.
So you guys weren't rehearsing that?
No, no, I was just explaining it to him. Like this is, you know, how it's supposed to look, but that's not how it's said at all. I mean, come on, Dad never said it that way.
No, he wouldn't go up to somebody and say, "What do you say?"
Right. Yeah, that feels awkward.
Chewing your words, you know. It's a
Yeah, every time I think of him, I could actually see his face when I say it.
oh yeah.
So,
Amazing.
Devon, thanks for being here.
It's an honor. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I've been excited to do this because I know there's so many people I think that can benefit from your story. So where are you originally from?
Kansas City, born and raised right here.
Born and raised KC.
Yeah.
5 out of 9. You're 5 out
Number
of 9.
5 out of 9. So 7 of us, between my mom and my dad, they had 7 kids in 10 years. So my mom was basically pregnant for 10 years, which is absolute insanity. And then my father remarried later and brought 2 more kids in the equation.
Got it. So you have 2 step.
2 steps.
Half.
Actually,
half.
step. Yep.
Okay, I got it. Okay. So, and the age ranges are from like, how old are you?
I'm 40.
You're 40. And then, so you're 5. So the youngest is how old?
I should know this. I would say 28. He's
28. And the oldest is?
47.
Oh my God.
Yeah, they're all bunched together. There's a huge group of us, and now all of them have kids. And so we were talking about hosting earlier. I think I haven't done the math outside of like when my husband was still alive. We would do the math of how many nieces and nephews we had, and together we had 27 nieces and nephews.
Gosh, wow.
So the family's just growing tremendously. Yeah.
Wow.
It's a gift.
Mom and dad still around?
My mom passed in 2009. My dad is still here.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So are holidays loud?
Yes,
Yeah.
they're insane. But I love that. I mean, I grew up again with 6 brothers. And so chaos, wrestling, I was taught how to spit and cuss and throw a football. I mean, that was my upbringing, you know?
That was
So
your deal. Right. Okay.
I like the rowdy bunch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what's a grade school where?
Gracemore Elementary was the main.
So you lived in Gracemore?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Home of the Necco Raiders.
Home of the
That's
Necco
right,
Raiders.
Necco Raiders.
Home of the Necco Raiders.
Although I cheered for the Giants.
Oh,
You
come
guys
on.
remember?
How did that
I
happen?
don't know. I don't know.
You lived in Gra-
A friend
that's like-
asked me. Yeah.
Gosh. Oh my God. We're Necco Raiders.
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean,
Everyone was.
through and through. I mean, we thought we did was win titles, you know. But we respect and appreciate the other side of things, but you know, black and silver. We bled black and
I mean,
silver.
here, look what I got on right now.
I see that.
You know, here, so the head coach at Pius is a former Necco Raider.
Oh, really?
So Pius has always been blue and gold. So, but now you could see there's been some gray added. There's been some black. We have all black uniforms. We have one of them's all gray. One of them's all black.
It's by design.
It's by design, 100% by design, 100%.
And it's crazy because it's very difficult to like. You know, we came from the Necco Raiders, but it's very difficult because I'm a huge Chiefs fan and I hate the Raiders. It's like how can I root for these guys? But growing up, I was.
Try explaining it to your 5-year-old. Like when Frankie George first started playing for the Necco Raiders at 5, you know, when he would hear Ice Cube's song for the Oakland Raiders, he would say, "Dad, play the Necco Waddle song." It's like, that's not the Necco Raider song.
There's a good Raider and a bad Raider.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. It was very difficult to explain to him.
Bad
you
to the
know?
Bone is the Necco Raider song. Anybody out there that knows the growing up that came from Johnny Norris, where the Bad to the Bone intro.
Yes.
It was great.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and then you went to Winnetonka.
I did go to Tonka, yep.
Okay. Did you go to college?
I did not.
Did not.
No.
So you start out in a house with 9 kids. You go and so talk us through how that was. I mean, oh my God. So how many bathrooms were in the house?
So we started, we actually lived out on 55th and Holmes and then moved north of the river. I think it was around my 2nd grade year. I'm not always great with timelines. So around my 2nd grade year. Before then, I think there was 1 bathroom at 55th and Holmes. We were just on top of each other, you know, many kids in 1 bedroom. And then when we moved to Gracemore, it was the largest house in Gracemore. And my grandparents actually stepped in and helped my dad. My dad was a single dad at that point. My mom had already left. And so my dad was raising 7 kids on his own. And that came with a few more bathrooms, but it was pretty chaotic. I mean,
So you didn't grow up with your mom, really?
did not grow up with my mom. She came in and out of the picture. So she was an addict and really, really struggled. I mean, I will tell you anything I say about her today, if we decide we're going to camp in that space or wherever God leads us in this conversation, I say with the utmost honor. She had a tumultuous upbringing. Far worse than mine, much more turbulent than mine, and she loved us the best way she knew how. And so I speak of her with honor, but she really struggled with addiction and every kind of addiction you can possibly imagine.
Well, I mean, so it's very difficult for someone who was never an addict to kind of understand that, because it's like, would you make fun of someone with cancer?
Right.
Right. Would you make fun of someone with, you know, any other type of disease, which is what addiction is, you know? So I think it's good that you're able to, because some people just have this horrible resentment toward their loved one who is an addict, you know, and it does get frustrating. It's like the worst position to be in is being the loved one of a drug addict.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
Although you did a pretty good job helping me out along the way.
Right. But there also was a point where I threw my hands up and said, he's going to die or go to jail. You know, I was like, there's nothing you can do to help this at all at some point, you know? And then when you went to jail, I was just like, okay, I'm going to go to sleep tonight.
Yeah.
Well, that's what Dad said. He's like, "Hey, Marilyn, she's like, should we go get him?" And Dad was like, leave him in there. We know where he's at.
Yeah.
We know he's safe.
Right,
So just
right.
leave him in there. We'll get him here in a couple days.
I mean, it's a miserable situation to
It
be in.
is.
So you grew up. So what was your mom's drug of choice?
Gosh, she really struggled with everything. So alcohol
Okay.
when I was younger. So she left. She actually left on my 5th birthday, which I learned here recently. I remember her leaving, but I didn't know that it was my birthday. So it's an interesting thing that I'm navigating right now. But she at that point was an alcoholic, and then coke and meth and sexual addiction, all of that entered into her world. I mean, it was. Honestly, hindsight looking back, it feels like anything she touched was either all in or not at all. And so addiction surrounded her. Yeah.
It's kind of one of those things where, like, when you ask an addict what their drug of choice is, and they say more.
Yeah.
It's just really
completely.
not. When you're running from something, it's like whatever can numb the pain, and it might be this today, and it might be that tomorrow.
Yeah.
So her upbringing, you saying, was more turbulent than yours.
Yeah.
Did she come from a family of addicts? Is this in your bloodline, like through your grandparents, or so? What do you think was her X factor? What do you think was making her use?
Yeah. So I would say I actually don't know the addiction history of her parents. What I do know is the abuse that was imposed upon her
She was
by
abused
both her parents. Yeah. By my grandparents.
physically.
Sexually.
Oh,
Yeah.
God.
So it's
I hate hearing
pretty brutal for her. And she started having kids at a pretty young age. She met my dad in high school. They had my oldest sister at 17. And there was something beautiful about having small children, like this unconditional love. She explained it to me at one point that there was this unconditional love that this child was giving her that she never experienced. And so she just had another child and another child and another child. But as you and I both know that, I mean, the root doesn't go away unless you process through the root, right? And so she had deep wounds that she never visited. And so the child brought relief and this unconditional love for her in a moment. But then as that child grew and we had another one, I mean, she was never fully healed.
Well, because for her, there was always this quid pro quo,
Yes,
right?
correct.
I'll love you if you do
Yeah.
whatever
It was completely conditional. Absolutely.
That's such a
Yeah.
miserable. I can't imagine that. I
Right.
mean, it's weird because you would think with the decisions you and I made, Andrew, that we had came from this similar background, which we didn't. My dad was this devout Catholic. My parents were together all the time. There was never any like real arguing.
Went to church on Sunday.
Went to church on Sunday, Catholic school, and then we ended up making the decisions that we made, and you're like, where the hell did that? I don't even remember ever seeing Dad drunk.
No, I think I saw him drunk one New Year's Eve when I was 14 years old. I still remember Mom was taking him home. I think maybe I was a little bit older.
That was the drinking contest with Jerry Capra, Nicky Palm, and Dad and Charlie
You
Pass.
can't drink with any of those guys. Anybody that knows those guys.
Especially Dad.
In their heyday.
Yeah.
They all sound Italian.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And we Mom was taking us all home in the minivan, and she had to stop for Dad to throw up. And
Oh gosh.
my dad, when the one time I ever saw him drunk, when he brushed his teeth, he had a gag reflex that you would hear him across the house.
Yeah.
So when he was throwing up, it was like him calling dinosaurs. You could hear him in heaven. I guarantee. I mean, it was so loud. I'm like, gosh darn.
Yeah.
Is he gonna burst a blood vessel in his eye?
Yeah.
But he didn't drink. He was a pretty mild mannered. There was no alcohol in our house at all.
Ever. I don't remember. I remember one time we got Mexican food and he had a beer with the Mexican food and he put the rest of them in the refrigerator and they might have sat there for a year till Mom finally threw them out.
Yeah. It's like, these got to be old. They're from those bottles are a classic.
Yeah.
They don't even make those cans anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then we end up making, all three of us,
Terrible decisions.
terrible decisions.
So did you surround yourself with people at school that were making terrible decisions? Was it the good company or bad? What is it? Bad morals corrupt good company? What's the scripture?
Is it bad character corrupts
Bad company corrupts good morals.
That might be it.
That
I
might be
believe
it.
that's it.
Yeah.
Honestly, we might have been, I don't remember. I never was like,
I did. I can speak for myself. Like I seeked people out who were testing the limits of life
Okay.
because, and a lot of my friends went to Tonka. And so, I had my private school friends and then I had my public school friends and, those groups occasionally mesh, but I was always seeking out people who wanted to have some fun. Let's stretch the limits of what we can do, and so
once you get locked into a serious drug collection, the tendency is to push it
as far as you can.
That's Hunter S. Thompson.
Yeah.
I can't take credit for that one.
Yeah.
True.
But so I can say that my character was, I wouldn't say it had great morals. I just wanted to have fun. And whatever people told me, hey, you shouldn't do this. I'm like, yeah, but I need to find out for myself.
For me, it wasn't ever peer pressure.
Yeah.
I never was like, because I'm doing what I want. It didn't matter to me what you thought, right? I think the saying curiosity killed the cat is what got me. I never was peer pressure or anything like that.
Isn't it interesting how we can have like commonalities amongst us, but how we arrived at that space, it's completely different. So for me, so much of what I ended up saying yes to was because I just wanted to belong. So if I entered into a space where the room was full of druggies, I was a druggie that day. If I entered into a space where, honestly, I got pregnant at 14 years old, had my son at 15. I was not interested in sex. Sex was not something that I was like interested in. It was not something I was seeking. It was just, I wanted to fit and I wanted to belong. So whatever I needed to do to get your acceptance or gain your acceptance or to belong to whatever, I'm in. That's what got me in so much trouble. And also just the turbulent upbringing, of course, and being surrounded by those things. So
it was a perfect storm.
Yeah.
It was a perfect storm. Insecurity.
Completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was.
Well, we all want to be accepted. I think that's just kind of natural until you get to a space where like, well, if you accept me for who I am today, great. But I think when you're growing up as an adolescent, it's like you seek acceptance from your peers. And the easiest way to do that is to kind of participate.
Yeah.
And even, you're invited to participate. And if you say, nah, I'm not, I'm out, I'm on that. Yes, you're standing on solid ground. That's good morals. But a lot of kids don't have that kind of power. And so they're just like, you know what? I want to be involved. Let's party.
So let me get this timeline straight.
Yeah.
When did you start using drugs?
I was around 11, like the latter part of my...
I have to assume the first was alcohol?
And pot, yeah.
Alcohol and pot transition to...
How did you get exposed to that at such an early age?
Living in Gracemore.
Living in Gracemore.
And surrounding myself with...
Your Gracemore was a little different than mine.
Oh, my Gracemore was... I did a lot of things in Gracemore. I am sure that there's going to be people who listen to this that are like, oh, yeah, I remember that Devon showing up. I'm not going to mention names, but on Manchester or like all the different streets that we had lots of party houses. And so the timeline of the different drugs and alcohol. So started with marijuana and then or marijuana and alcohol, but then Coke was brought in pretty quickly. Acid was brought in pretty quickly. Ecstasy was in the mix.
Okay, but I'm trying to figure out how old were you when you had the guts to try LSD? Because I had one experience with hallucinogenics and it was horrific, like absolutely terrified of. So at what point did you, how did you have the guts to even try that type of stuff?
I was running around with people that were older than me at that point. And again, it goes back to this belonging thing. I mean, if I could draw a line back to all of it, there's two things: my upbringing and the environment that I was brought up in. And then this innate sense that is actually, it's innate in us to belong. Like God created us that way, right?
Yeah.
But what we end up doing is attaching our belonging to all of these other things. And so I didn't think through these things. It was like, if you're doing it, sure. If you're bringing it, great. If I belong, wonderful. Like, count me in as long as I can be a part of whatever everyone else is doing.
And I think,
go ahead.
No, and I think you start to find your identity in that.
Yeah.
As you relate to those people and your sense to belong. Okay, I belong here. Now I have an identity here.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And I grew up with no church, a scriptureless home. So I had no idea that I belonged to God. I had no idea that I was created by him. I had no idea that he designed me on purpose and for a purpose, that he knitted me together in my mother's womb. All of that I was ignorant to all of it. And so I attached myself to all of these different people and different things to gain that sense of belonging that, again, is innate in us. We're hardwired that way by our Father.
So how old?
16.
16.
So by 16, you had tried the myriad of drugs that you've just listed.
Yes.
Okay.
Meth is really what completely destroyed my life. And that came about 18 years old.
Okay.
So the other ones were side pieces. Meth was your true love.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah. I mean, marijuana never went away. Alcohol never went away, but meth was destructive.
So you were a parent at 14, and you had a son, correct?
Yeah. And so
It's-
actually parent at 15.
15.
Pregnant at 14, had him at 15.
Okay. And his name is
Chandler.
Absolutely. I know Chandler very well. I love Chandler. It's
And
great.
he loves Jesus.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's a great kid.
pretty amazing. Yeah.
So at 14, you were still experimenting after you had your son Chandler, you were still experimenting and being a parent and going to school.
Yeah.
How did you do that?
Grace. I mean, without knowing Jesus, it's uncommon grace is what the theological term is that there's this grace that's covering you, even though you haven't said yes to Jesus, you haven't surrendered your life. But I mean, I can go back, his fingerprints are everywhere.
So
Were you a good student?
Sometimes I ended up dropping out and then finishing at Ombudsman. Are you guys familiar with Ombudsman? But I was having a hard time juggling all of that. So between the addiction, trying to be a parent, trying to figure out, I moved out at 16, all the different things that are coming with, just being 16 by itself is hard. I ended up saying I was going to drop out and then went to Ombudsman, which is just like this self-paced school. And so I just sat in front of a computer and I ended up being done with school a semester early, but still walked with my class.
got it.
Yeah.
So when you were living by yourself at 16, how are you affording to pay for things?
Are you familiar with Shemeka's that used to be on Independence Avenue?
Yeah.
It's, I think.
Know the family well.
Okay. So I worked for the Shemeka's.
Okay.
And I lived in Northeast and I worked in the deli back there. So I worked for Frank and Phil Shemeka. Yeah. So
Frank, that's probably just a little bit older than me. He's probably 50.
Yeah. I think they still have the Shemeka Sausage Company in the Northeast area, but it's like Queens Market or something now. It's no longer.
And they got a restaurant that's down in Northtown. It's unbelievable.
Shout out to Shemeka's. Yeah, it's
yeah.
very good.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
really good.
I love their sausage.
I love everything. They got a great Italian steak, too.
They really do.
I don't miss meals very much, clearly. There's not much I don't like. It's exceptional.
Yeah.
It's exceptional.
Yeah.
So,
So I was working.
okay. And then I'm assuming that, you're just funding your habit.
Yes.
I mean, if you're doing meth, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so
Was Chandler's dad around?
In and out. Yes.
In and out.
Yep.
Okay.
and so
His grandmother was a source of strength.
Yeah.
She was very present. Yeah.
So how do I want to ask this question? Would you say that Chandler was cognizant of the issue that you were having? Maybe something's not right with mom type thing.
I would say around 4 or 5, definitely. But that's when I was knee deep in my meth addiction. And so I've got some pretty tough memories that I've had to forgive myself for.
Yeah, hardest person to forgive.
Yeah. I mean, I'm getting teary eyed just thinking about it.
Do I need to get some?
I think I'm okay. I'll let you know.
I almost brought some Kleenex too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We this might get emotional, but
So how long does this last for? 18 to what?
18 to 20. So it was 2 years of, it was really probably about 17 and a half. So my daughter was born at 17. And shortly thereafter is when I was introduced to meth. And I had been using meth, like putting it in my nose, but I was introduced to smoking it. And something
difference.
happened in my world. The moment I smoked it, like my entire life changed.
So you start using, your route of administration is nasal.
Yes.
Okay. And then you do that for how long?
The that was in my world for a couple years. So it was like in and out. More, I mean, I don't know that there was obviously an addiction, but it wasn't completely controlling my life to where I just needed more.
Captured your every thought.
Yes.
And then someone says, "Hey, you're going to mess up your nose that way. Let's try this."
I can remember who I was with. I can remember like the temperature of the space. I can remember the lighting in the room. It was a monumental, not in a positive way, but moment in my life where there was a huge shift that took place. And from that moment until I was arrested, I mean, it just got worse
That much
worse.
of a difference. I wouldn't think that would make that much of a difference for the drug's impact.
So when you're speaking about meth, route of administration is really what you're looking at is the time and it hits you, that the person feels it, and the intensity in which it comes on.
The timing can't be much faster.
It's much different than snorting it.
It is.
And for I have never injected
I've never injected drugs.
but I from what I understand, it's even more intense if you inject meth.
So that's where I ended up. I was an IV drug user.
So you went from snorting to smoking. Okay, so let's talk about this then. So there's a huge difference between snorting and smoking, right?
Yeah.
Clearly.
Yeah.
I mean, because then at that point, it really gets its hooks into you.
Yeah.
You're telling me.
Yeah.
Right?
That was my personal experience. Yes.
Okay, and then once you went to IV, is it another big jump?
Completely. I mean, you're speaking of just the moment you feel it. I mean, you're putting it into your veins, and there is an immediate rush of the high. Like it's completely different than putting it in your nose, or completely different than smoking it.
If you have any issues of something going on that you're trying to escape from, the route of administration will help you escape that much quicker. Now, that being said, because I don't want to glorify the fact that people should change a route of administration, we're here to say that, it's absolutely all bad.
Yeah.
But in the same sense, it's also good to understand that you deal with another level of your mind being captured through the route of administration, because you can forget that much quicker. But yes, it's going to grab you and hold you that much tighter. Yeah.
When I went through rehab, I did a 30-day inpatient after I got out of jail, and that was a big shift in my world, and really where I began my whole sobriety journey. But they had taught me something just scientifically of what's happening to your body and how your body naturally produces dopamine. And so if your regular level is right here, and then you get high, and then you come down, here's your baseline, you're underneath of that. And so now regular Devon without the drug isn't even at her baseline. I don't feel normal. I don't feel right. I need something else. And it just continues to go lower and lower. And then your body quits producing the dopamine. I mean, there is a
It's a negative feedback.
absolutely. So you of course have the choice when you're stepping into addiction, but your body is not functioning the way it's designed to function, which makes it that much harder for you to overcome this addiction.
Yeah, there's like physiologically, I know. So not only are you talking about the concentration of dopamine, but then your receptor.
Yep.
Right. So what happens is when you flood your brain with dopamine, the dopamine receptors will pick up on this enormous concentration of dopamine. So what they do is they will start to withdraw.
That's right.
Right. So now even though you have this enormous amount of dopamine, now there's nothing for it there's not as many receptors for it to bind to. So then now what happens is you need more and more and more.
Well,
and then the effect is less and less and less because there's nothing for it to bind to.
Right.
It's called down regulation.
And that's with you describing the baseline. It also now, because your baseline with down regulation drops so much further below, you have to use just to feel normal.
Right.
And so then what happens and this is what happens, and I think what happens with a relapse, right? So because now you go so long without using, okay? And your dopamine levels are down to absolutely nothing. Yeah. So now what do those receptors do? Now they're detecting no dopamine, okay? All right. And so now what do the dopamine receptors do? They upregulate. And now you start having receptor. And then when the addict relapses and they use the exact same amount that they were using prior to, they have this enormous dopamine surge and now all these receptors for it to bind to.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And that's why, and I'm sure Devin learned this, and we spoke about this on previous podcasts. It's you don't pick up where you would have if you just started again. You pick up exactly where you left off if you would have never stopped.
And that's why I think there's so many that relapse sometimes kills them.
Yeah.
That relapse will sometimes kill them.
Yeah.
Yes. So you have a newborn, you have a 4-year-old,
Yeah.
and you're in the throes of basically full-blown IV drug addiction.
Yeah, so close to that. I mean, Chandler would have been 3 when I jumped into the meth addiction, and then Jaden would have been closer to the newborn, 6 months old. So,
And you're juggling all of this.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But
So-
I don't know that juggling is even fair. I mean, everything happens so fast. I mean, if you just look at the 2 months and that time frame, by the time it was all over, this is hard, but real, but I had signed temporary custody away to my dad because I had no running water, I had no electricity. I had been evicted from my home. I mean, there was, this is another hard one, but I'm just going to be real and honest because
Please.
here's the deal. God completely transformed my life. I know that I am forgiven and I am covered. But it doesn't make it easy when you go back, and I'm a visual person and I can go back and see the environment in which my kids were in, which is never okay for any child. But by the grace of God, they love Jesus. They attend the Rock. They are doing good and healthy, beautiful things. They are married to Christians. And so, that's really my heart is to share like the power of when God gets a hold of your heart, what he can do with any heart. Doesn't matter. No one's too far gone. He can
Which is why
absolutely transform your life.
I wanted to have this conversation
Yeah.
because that's that's like the single declarative sentence that
Completely.
states the main idea of this podcast, right?
Amen.
That's the thesis of it is really what you just said.
Yeah.
So how long does it last, Devin? When you finally are, I can't say quit, you were probably forced into a situation where,
Share with us the situation that brought you to get in
Sobriety.
trouble and then go mandatory, get rehab, and kind of walk us through that.
Okay. So back to when I was getting evicted, I signed temporary custody away to my parents, to my dad.
how old are the kids at this point?
Chandler would have been 5 and Jaden would have been 3,
Okay.
right around that
Okay.
ish. And I knew it was right before Chandler's 5th birthday, actually. So I do know. And I remember thinking, if I sign temporary custody away, I'm either going to get well or I'm going to go off the deep end. I remember clearly sitting there in this house that I was being evicted from with no running water, no electricity. There's literally needles everywhere. My kids are only surviving on the little Debbie snacks that the neighbors bringing over. So this is the part that I forgive myself for that, right? And I know that God's redeemed it. And I remember signing the temporary custody away. And then from that May until I got arrested in September, I was on the streets. I was sleeping in this guy's garage who was a user. He would bring this cot down from the upper area and I would sleep there. Sometimes, other times I didn't have a place to sleep. I mean, it just spiraled big time, very fast. And then I got arrested in September. We were going to pick up a bunch of drugs because we were dealing in the Northeast area.
Dealing to support your habit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was sitting next to this gentleman. He was driving. I will omit his name, but I was counting the $100 bills. I was putting them all like facing the same direction in stacks of thousands. So when we get there, we can go in, go out real quick. But he ends up rear-ending this gal in front of us. Are you familiar with Relentless Pursuit and where that's at?
Yes.
I'm familiar with Relentless Pursuit, but I don't know where it's at. That's
Location.
one of the houses for women being trafficked.
That's correct.
Okay.
So-
I heard about that from Run to Stop It.
It's amazing. Story for a different day for sure, but it was on that street. So they hadn't bought that block yet, but there was a little Chinese restaurant there. We got into that car accident. I fled the scene because I had warrants out for my arrest.
You just took off.
I took off. Yeah, I completely took off. But there was a house that, like a safe house that we would go to. We called her Nana. I went to Nana's house. I started to get a little bit worried. I end up walking back to the scene. Like, no joke. I go back to the scene and the cops spotted me. My ID was in the car. So they started chasing me. I didn't have a dime on me. I had nothing. All that money that was just in my lap. I was trying to go into a restaurant to try and eat. I was just, what do I do? They end up knocking me down in the Chinese restaurant parking lot. I get arrested. And that was the beginning journey of my sobriety. So I had warrants.
So did you guys just have money on you, or did you have dope too?
Both.
How much?
I don't remember the amount.
Enough to go to jail.
Enough to go to jail.
Was
Yeah, paraphernalia, for sure. Paraphernalia charges that I had to.
So you had previous charges, warrant out for your arrest.
Yeah.
You get caught with a bunch of dope, a bunch of money.
So not a lot of money, not a lot of dope. We were going to pick up the dope. So, but we did have dope on us. It just wasn't like this extreme amount that we were getting ready to pick up.
Right.
But needles, all the.
How much were you getting ready to go pick up?
I don't remember that either, but it was not.
gosh.
It wasn't a small amount. It was not small.
You were going to push some weight.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. All
Yeah.
right. So
I was running with a pretty big drug circle in Kansas City. Yeah.
got it. So you get arrested, you go to jail.
Get arrested, go to jail. I was in Kansas City that night, but I did not have any warrants in Kansas City. I had warrants in Clay County. I had warrants in Henrietta, which is Ray County, and then also Gladstone. So I just after that night, they transferred me to Gladstone. I was there until they worked through all of that, then went from Gladstone to Ray County. And Ray County is where I spent most of my time and also where I detoxed. So I was
In jail.
in
the county.
in solitary confinement. Like it was so bad.
So
bad.
Okay, so let me ask you this, because I know like with opioids, there's this huge withdrawal,
Yeah.
right? Is the same thing with meth?
Yes.
So you have a similar withdrawal with meth.
I mean, I haven't had withdrawal symptoms with opioids by themselves. I mean, I was definitely partaking in opioids at that same time.
Down probably.
So it could have been a mix of, me coming down from the meth and the opioids. It's just
And you didn't even get to have anything to help you.
no.
They just
put me in
suffered.
solitary confinement.
And no counseling to say, hey, what you're feeling right now is natural from what you were using.
Right.
And yours is similar. You didn't get that luxury either. You've detoxed in county as well.
Yeah, well,
Yes?
I got put in solitary maximum for like 4 or 5 days in Johnson County, and then I got farmed out to Gardner and spent like 4 or 5 days there. So the first 8 to 10 days, I was just like Devon, just kind of detoxing.
How long does that detox last?
I would say I was probably in there 6 or 7 days. And I mean, I was so sick. I was puking. I was miserable.
so
I was
tell me the
laying on the
symptoms.
floor. Shakes, chills, puking. I puked a lot. I don't know if that was one of your symptoms. It was
It's flu-like symptoms,
Yeah.
but the flu times 10.
yeah, it was
But the
Talk to me
emotional
about
side
the
of it.
psychological component of it, because I'm sure like there's a huge psychological component to it as well.
Yeah. It was pretty dark. I mean, again, at this point, I didn't even know who Jesus was. I had no hope. I mean, I didn't even understand that there was something to look to or something to gaze at beyond my current circumstance. All I knew is what I grew up in and how I felt in that moment. So, I mean, it was dark. I mean, I think in that moment, I've never considered myself as suicidal, but if I was ever near that would have been a moment like if I could have just ended everything, I would have. Like it was dark and hard.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to that. When I was in Johnson County, thankfully I had a Catholic upbringing, and literally remember, because it's not the Marriott, it's not an Airbnb, it's a metal bed with a little bit of foam. You don't even get a pillow. And I remember getting on my knees going, God, if you get me out of this and help me out, I'll never do it again. And so there was a little bit of peace that was brought along with that to kind of, subside some of the emotional feelings that I was feeling at the time. But I could only imagine in your situation, Devon, how difficult that must have been when you don't have that exposure
Right.
to your faith, and you're sitting there and you're just resting with what you've already, what you've done to kind of, shape your life.
Yeah.
I can only imagine how hard that was.
So how long, at what point does like maybe something click where you say, okay, I'm starting to feel a little better.
Yeah.
I think I can actually, walk through this path, right? Where, you know what I mean? Where initially you're like, oh God, just please kill me.
Yeah.
And what was that noise?
Probably my iPad.
Okay. All right. So, I'm just making sure no camera clicked
Right.
off.
No, we're all
didn't lose
we're all
sound.
good. Yeah.
So at what point do you say, okay, I think I can, how many days go by where you finally say, okay, I'm actually starting to not feel worse, but start to feel better?
So this is a cool moment. This is when I met Jesus. So in Ray County, and when I got out of solitary confinement, when I was no longer puking, that's when I was still experiencing withdrawal symptoms, but I wasn't just puking what felt like every 2 minutes, which was probably, like I said, maybe 6-7 days in. I was sitting on, they have tanks there. So they have like A tank, B tank, C tank, and I was in G tank. I remember it specifically. I don't know why I remember that, but I do. So there were other girls in there. People were like rolling cigarettes, playing cards, just whatever. It was kind of interesting. There was cable television in there. It was slightly like an adult daycare. Looking back, it's interesting how comfortable it was for us. But the beds were not comfortable. But I was sitting there, and I'm an avid reader. I love to read, and I picked up the Bible for the very first time. So I've never been exposed to Scripture, never been exposed to God. And I still own this Bible, and it's a New International Version, so just an NIV version. And on the cover, it says "free" on the inside. So I open it up, and it's not just Scripture. It's actually, there's all of these inserts of people's testimony. So I'm reading the Scripture, I'm reading the testimony, I'm reading the Scripture, I'm reading the testimony, and in that moment, I realized it's for me. Like it doesn't matter what I had done. It didn't matter where I had come from. It didn't matter that I had broken my family. It didn't matter that I was an addict. It didn't matter, fill in the blank, all the different things that I had done that had shaped my life up to this point. It did not matter. Like he had this love for me, regardless of my stained track record. And I surrendered my life to Jesus right there by myself on that bed in that very moment. And that's the moment I knew everything from that point could shift and be different.
Is there a scripture that you were reading outside of that, the testimonies that kind of got your attention? Is there a specific passage or scripture that was like, just really opened your eyes?
Yeah. The knitting together in my mother's womb.
Yeah.
To know that he's the one that created me, to know that he's the one that my identity came from, that it was his very hands and his very breath in my lungs that allowed me to be sitting in that very space I was that day. I wasn't marked by all, my life was marked by all of these other things, but I was marked by something greater, which was the very creator of the universe created me. He knitted me together. He chose me. He drew me in. And so it was the knitting.
So now you're developing that spiritual foundation, and realizing that it's not built on sand. It's a concrete foundation. You go to treatment mandatory, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
How long were you there?
30 days. It was a 30-day inpatient in Trenton, Missouri. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that area, but
So how long till you had no withdrawal symptoms?
by the time I got out of rehab, I did not have withdrawal symptoms.
So was it 30 days?
So I haven't thought about this. When I surrendered my life to Jesus, and like as soon as I got through that massive detox, everything shifted at that point. I had moments of desiring it, but at that point it became a choice. It became a choice when I got out. Like it wasn't something that I had to have.
Right.
Like something broke in that moment.
Sure.
Something broke.
The chain was broke.
Yeah.
So it's probably safe to say that the physical withdrawal ended within a couple weeks, as it typically does, and the emotional withdrawal kind of hangs on until you start figuring out the coping mechanisms of kind of unpacking what you've done.
Yeah.
When you were in rehab, did you find and see God and how he worked through the 12 steps?
So this was an interesting rehab. It was small town, Trenton, Missouri. So it's a very, very small town. And it was more of you kind of got out what you put in, to be honest with you.
I think that's with any rehab.
Okay.
You really, you can't help the unwilling.
Yeah.
If you're willing and to take on the information, I feel like the information that's shared, if you're an open book and open to receiving, then what you put into it is what you get out of it. If you're not ready, you're not ready.
Right. Yeah. You can want it desperately for somebody, but until they want it for themselves, there's no movement forward.
Yeah.
How old are you at this point?
I was 20.
20 years old.
I just celebrated 20 years of sobriety in November.
Congratulations. Yeah, that's
Crazy, 'cause here,
awesome.
Father Mark was just here, and his 7 years is in November.
Yeah.
It was November. I can't remember. Well, I can't remember the date, but it was November as well. November. like 14th.
Mine was all. I remember because your birthday's on Halloween,
I'm a Halloween.
and then I got caught in November and went to jail in November, and stopped using it in November.
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact date, but you can probably look me up on CaseNet.
Yeah, you can. You can look everything up on CaseNet.
Yeah, it's there.
We played. So Thanksgiving was the 23rd. Okay, so then we played Seneca the 25th. Odessa was the 18th. I believe he was November 18th because we had mass right before we
I
played.
think it was
Odessa.
November 12th. I think we spoke about the number 12 in Father.
You gonna argue with me right now?
Well, I mean, here,
you may be right. I don't know.
throw the instant replay flag right now. Let's bring it up.
So you're 20 years old and you just celebrate your 20 years of sobriety. You're in rehab and you're what about you're not sure how long you were in there for.
In rehab, it was 30 days. It was 30-day
30
inpatient. And just to answer your question on, you mentioned the 12 steps.
Yeah.
So it really was, you get out what you put in. The way that this rehab was modeled is during the day, we were bused to this, it was like a one-room building that was right across the street from an elementary school. Like, who designed that? I don't know. We shouldn't have been across the street from an elementary school. And then at 5 o'clock, they would take us back up to this hotel, and that's where we would stay. And there was young people, like 22-year-olds, like just playing Xbox and making sure that we were staying inside the hotel. But people were sneaking out and going down to the liquor store. You could see the liquor store like lights, from where we were staying. So it seems kind of funny, but truly, if I wanted to engage in my sobriety and engage in scripture in that moment, I had the choice to, or I could follow the people who are going to buy alcohol and putting it up in the ceiling. And so it was pretty relaxed, but it was, I remember being 2 weeks in to the 30-day inpatient program, and my dad came to visit me, and he was like, "This is the first time I'm seeing my daughter in years. Like I haven't been
just seen the demon that was in you."
He's like, you're communicating different. Like, it's so good to see you. Like, I remember that being something he said. It is so good to see you. And so, but still, it was at that point, yes, the 12 steps, yes, the things I was learning, some of the things that they had us doing, like we were writing letters to people. I had to write a letter to my mom. There were certain people I had to write letters to and just say, hey, while I'm getting sober, I'm going to have to.
You got to make amends.
You
have to.
I'm going to make amends. And there's certain people that I couldn't just throw myself right back into. I couldn't go visit my mom.
Right.
My mom was an addict. And so it's, I love you, but we're going to have to keep a good safe distance until I'm strong enough to actually influence you, opposed to the addiction or you influencing me.
Right.
Yeah.
And so all of that was healing and therapeutic. But the number one thing that was transformative was the word. I sat in the hallway of that hotel that we were staying at. It's not like a normal hotel. Just think small town hotel, right? That's where we're at.
Right.
I sat in the hallway with the scriptures open the entire time. And then I'd go back and I'd learn what they were teaching in the classroom. I'd go back at night and I would sit there in that hallway with my back against the wall, reading God's word. I mean, it was such a gift. It was insane to me that this had been available to me the entire time, and I was oblivious to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So after you go through your inpatient rehab, obviously you have some legal stuff that you have to sort out.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about that. But how did your spiritual journey continue outside of treatment? Did you find a church? Did you have a spiritual mentor? Did you have a sponsor?
Yeah.
Those kind of
Yeah,
things.
good questions. So when I got out, I realized quickly that I couldn't stay in Kansas City. Everything I knew was drugs. My entire circle was drugs. And I didn't know anybody outside of that life. And so I chose to move to Milan. So I got out in December, and by Christmas time, I was living in Milan. And
Milan, where's that at?
are you familiar with Kirksville? People typically know where Kirksville's at. No?
There's the med school out there in Kirksville,
Yep.
the DO school.
Yeah, so that's why people know it. I mean, it used to be called Truman College, and now I think it's called something else.
Yeah.
It's probably 40 minutes from the Iowa border.
Yeah.
So, and about 45 minutes from Trenton. So that's how I ended up in Milan.
So you're there and you don't know anyone.
I know one person. It was a guy that I was in rehab with. Great move,
that's
right?
not really
Like,
good.
yeah, I know. I know. So I got back, realized I couldn't stay in the environment. I called, his name was Ryan. I called Ryan and I was like, hey, I can't be in Kansas City. I'm not going to be able to stay sober. I'm coming home. There's a meth pipe right here. Like, and I just want to pick it up. I still have it right here in front of me. So I need to get out of here. Do you have a place for me to stay? At this point, my temporary custody was still with my dad and my brother. With my kiddos. And so he asked his cousin who he was living with if he could, if I could stay there. And this guy, for whatever reason, said yes. And so they came and picked me up. I moved out there. I rented out the upper section of his home and started working for a hog processing plant. So my world of getting sober was literally like the prodigal son. I was standing in with pigs all day, every day. I trimmed neck bones. I trimmed bellies. I trimmed the jowl. There was a lot of really disgusting, gross things that I did, covered in blood, head to toe, every day while I got sober. But during that time frame, there's a small church there, Milan Christian Church, and I immediately got planted into a community. And so the entire journey wouldn't be what it is today had I not said yes to community at the very, very beginning.
Is there somebody at that church that really kind of brought you under their wing and said, you know what, we have somebody who's newly sober, new to the area, and diving into the word, I want to kind of be her spiritual mentor?
Yeah, I didn't have that specifically, but I recall a few names of people who were aware of my situation and present. They didn't necessarily take me under their wings and voice that to me.
And sometimes I think it's good to walk into those, especially when you're raw. I think it's good to walk into those new church environments, and it's okay to remain anonymous for a while. Just feel it out and see what God has for you.
Right.
So how long are you there for, and when do you transition back to Kansas City and plant yourself at the Rock?
So I was in that area probably about 2.5 years. Again, my timelines are not always the best, but about 2.5 years. I came back to Kansas City, and I was actually part of a different church called Desperation Church in Liberty.
Where's that at?
It's no longer Desperation Church. I think it's called The Table now, something like that.
Okay.
But it's over off of Kent Street in 291. I'm trying to think of what's over there.
Is it just south of Quick Trip on 291, like south of Rancho?
Yes. Yes.
Everybody
That's correct.
marks there in the Midwest, marks where they're at
By Quick Trip?
by their nearest Quick Trip.
But there's two Quick Trips on 291. So I was
Yeah.
like, which one? But there's a Quick Trip near Rancho, and then there's a Quick Trip up by the Walgreens. So, but yeah, I love me a good QT.
I do too.
Everything. Yeah.
They really,
Quick Trip's amazing.
If Quick Trip is listening, which I'm hoping that they are, bring back the breakfast burrito because it was so good. And now they just, yes, they have breakfast burritos, but they're not the fully loaded breakfast burrito. And I just miss that.
I love that you say that. That was my husband's favorite.
It was
he
so
loved those breakfast burritos. He loved
they're
Quick Trip in
excellent.
general.
Dad liked Quick Trip coffee.
Oh yeah,
I'm not a fan of Quick Trip coffee.
Yeah, I don't drink coffee, but Dad liked.
and oddly enough, he worked and was a partner in a coffee company,
Yeah,
and
and
he
he'd go to Quick
still
Trip.
loved Quick Trip coffee.
Yeah, we go to Quick Trip
And he
every
drank
morning.
Folgers at home.
Okay, that's very odd. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you're at. Tell me the name of the church again.
It was called Desperation Church.
For how long?
From 2006 to about 2012. So I was,
2006 to 2012, and then did you go to the Rock in 2012?
I think I am about 9 years into The Rock. So 2014, 2015-ish.
2014, 2015. But then you obviously didn't play the role you play now.
Right. Yep. Nope. I would just
Just attended.
attended and served. Yeah. In any way that people would allow me to serve.
And then from
honestly, I think I was a witness to kind of that step in your life happening, because we went to Haiti on mission trips,
Yeah.
and I'll let you tell more about that. But from my perspective, I almost like heard you speak, heard you pray, heard her, just kind of teach the word, and was like, gosh, she's got something. It's impressive. God is.
Well, here, I remember this is the reason why I thought to put her on here. I'm like, I know she's got, because I remember you kind of touched on it just real quick one day in church. I knew you had a past, and, and then I knew you're introduced to Jesus, and then I knew there's this huge transformation.
Yeah.
And that's really all I knew. And so I'm like, okay, well, I want to know more. So that's why, obviously, I invited you here. But so you serve in any capacity you can, and now, so the big thing that I want people to understand is there's this drug addict, there's this encounter with Jesus, and then let's talk about what you do at the Rock now.
Yeah.
And when you started filling that role, and when you knew that you're supposed to be filling that role.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just real quick to touch on that, when you're saying, drug addict, teenage pregnancy, I mean, turbulent upbringing, you can fill in all those different things, meeting Jesus, completely transforming my life. But here's what's so beautiful about God. The moment I surrendered my life to Jesus in that jail cell, I'm incarcerated, right? I'm just coming out of a brutal detox. He knew in that moment that I was going to be on staff for a local church doing what I'm doing today. That's mind-blowing to me. When I was sitting there, that was not something that was ever in my line of sight, wasn't even in my peripheral. Like, I would have never thought that, hey, I'm going to be serving God through the local church doing what I'm doing today. So, I mean, that's amazing. And I say that because whoever might be listening to this, wherever they might find themselves, like, God has something absolutely incredible and beautiful for them. If they commit to making room for him, they commit to his ways. You say yes to all his ways, not some of his ways. You can't take apart the Bible, but all of it for what it is, and say yes to that and surrender to that. He will do. There's more stories like mine. He's going to take you to somewhere where you've never thought you could ever go. And so I just wanted to share that.
And what's so crazy about, you just kind of both of you listing off, what Devon was. And I think up until you get to that place where you encounter God, those things, the long list of those things, that's what defines you. You're an addict. You're all of those negative things in your life that you regret and that have brought shame and guilt to your life.
Right.
And they're who you are. And like, you're the guy who stole from, the liquor store. You're the guy who borrowed money from somebody and never paid it back. And then all those things, the little things, that list is so much longer. But it's crazy when you actually encounter God, it's like all those things don't define me anymore. Those just were a part of a journey that I had to go through in order to get to this point to meet God. And now that's who I'm found in. And that's what defines me as a person.
Right. Yeah, those are things I did. It's not who I am.
Right.
There's an incredible
Huge
separation.
difference.
Who I am is loved by the Father, chosen by the Father, gifted and anointed by him on purpose for a purpose to bring forth, his name and to go out and show the people, that this is available to them, And so it's again, those are things I did, but not who I am.
And a lot of people don't know the power that's found in that. People start seeking their spiritual journey and they'll look in several different places, but they don't know that the power that is found in. And I know, Frank, you've said a saying once, a time or two on the podcast about doing what is good always results in a good outcome. I can't remember how you phrased it before, but it's until you have that encounter, that shift doesn't happen. And I want people who are listening to know that there is a supernatural power found in God that will transform you
Yes.
into his child and what he wants from you. You just gotta stay diligent and know that trials and tribulations, as soon as you make that commitment, you are going to be faced with some of the old trials and tribulations. And it's going to be like, well, here's what I would have done. Now I have this resource to draw on.
Right.
So I'm curious as to when you started. So you joined the Rock, and you're just going and serving in any capacity. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So
What do you do now there?
I'm the Connections and Volunteer Director. So to put it simply and easy, it is my job to get people connected to the life of the church. So
Right.
whether that's through connect groups or small groups, a lot of people know them as small groups, or through different classes that we offer, or through outreach endeavors, connecting people to the local church.
Okay, and you've done that for how long?
So I came on staff December 1st of 2021. And so that's when I left the business world, because I was coming from the business world.
what'd you do in the business world?
So lots of different roles, but my last role was project manager for Microsoft. Now, I didn't work for Microsoft. I worked for another organization, but Microsoft was something that we were launching and pushing out to the organization. And so
Okay.
that was my last role. Before that, it was sales and management. So I left there, came on staff December of 2021, December 1st, which was my husband's birthday. And then January 6th, 2022, he passed away.
So yeah, I wanted to get to that.
Yeah.
So you go through.
Before we get to that, I want to know. So how long have you been at the church before you went on the mission trip to Haiti?
Gosh, did we go for the first time in 2016? What do you think?
I think it was roughly
15 or 16?
15 or 16. Yeah.
So it would have been 2 or 3 years.
Okay, 2 or 3 years. And at this point, you're just serving at any capacity.
Anywhere they'll take me, yeah.
And is there something there in between that time frame that maybe pastor said to you, or because I remember vividly some of the comments that were made about you, your story, and your spiritual walk and your gifts. I don't know if those were communicated to you, but I do remember pastor mentioning something about that. Did anything like that occur when you were in Haiti? Was there a conversation that took place about that, or?
So not necessarily in Haiti. I mean, Haiti definitely transformed my life. I mean, every single human on planet Earth should put their feet on foreign soil.
Yeah.
It will shape your heart and your spirit like nothing else can. And but I would say that it deepened my heart for God. It deepened my heart for missions. It deepened my heart for just advancing his kingdom on this side of eternity, for people to be able to experience who Jesus is.
And what's so cool is that your daughter Jaden was there with you.
She was.
And that was just so cool.
Very redemptive.
To kind of know and seeing her and how she's interacting with these kids, because you guys were doing youth. Mm-hmm. I was on the construction team, and of course, Pastor Philip, if you know anything about him, his attention to detail when it comes to painting, even just walls, you're not going to be painting right. You're not.
This is very true. This is very true.
And I believe he's made some comments about me not being a good painter. And if he listens to this, which I hope he does, let me tell you, my painting skills now are next level.
But he's responsible for that. Huh?
He did take a hand in that.
Credit's due.
right.
I do take pride in my painting skills. And
So I want to shift real quick. So when did you meet your husband? When did you get married? Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So met my husband the 2 days after I moved back to Kansas City. So I moved back to Kansas City from Milan, knowing that I was in a space where I'm much healthier. My family was very nervous about me coming back into the environment. And I'm like,
how old are you at this point?
22.
So this is 2 years.
Yeah.
2 years sober.
Yeah.
So you met your husband
Yep.
at 22 years old.
Yep.
And when did you get married?
Gosh, we were together for 2 years. So it must have been 24.
So you got married at 24 years old.
I'm really hoping I've got this. It's all close to this, guys. So if I'm off 6 months,
I'm not going to hold you
offer
to
me
it.
grace.
I'm not going to hold you to
Now,
it.
Chris is older than you, correct?
Yeah, Chris is older. Yeah.
So, okay, so and then you're married at 24, and then you guys collectively go to the Rock then.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we were at Desperation Church together first, and then our senior pastors of that church ended up leaving and moving to Colorado, and we ended up finding the Rock. So
Did you meet him through Desperation? Was it, or was it? Did you know him prior?
we met at Penguin Park. Of all places, you guys familiar with Penguin Park? I mean, it was
Gracemore.
Kansas City.
Back to Gracemore,
Back
or not Gracemore, but
It's that area.
it's
Very similar stomping
We went to
grounds.
St. Gabriel's, which was
that's Sherwood. I'm sorry, that's Sherwood.
It is Sherwood. Yes, that's right.
St. Gabriel's is right down the street, so we know Penguin Park for sure. Yeah.
Yep.
So you meet him. You're married at 24, and you guys both collectively go to the Rock, and then you transition to the part you're playing.
Yeah.
And then
So let me just tell you a little bit about that, how I came on staff. So you were just asking the question
Yeah.
if there was something spoken to me, and there was something spoken to me, but it wasn't Pastor Philip, it was God. And Philip, it seemed like you know how when you sit in a message, this happens to me often. I think it happens to anybody who's being sensitive to Holy Spirit, and you're like, he's reading my mail. Like everything he's speaking up there is directly towards me. But that is the power of the Holy Spirit. Like Pastor Philip can open up his mouth, and Holy Spirit can take that word and dissect it 350 different ways for the 350 different people that are sitting there. It's how Holy Spirit works. It's amazing. And so he was on this kick where he was consistently saying, hey, some of you guys are asking for another sign from God, but you haven't even been obedient to the first thing he asked you to do. So be obedient to the first thing. And he kept saying it. And God had spoken to me full-time ministry. And I'm like, I think you've got the wrong girl. Like I'm completely unqualified. I enjoy what I'm doing. There's someone better. And how about that? Putting your hand to God.
Yeah.
I think you.
Yeah, I think you're
I've
wrong on this one.
Yeah. I've got it figured out. I don't think you do. And this is not something that
so he planted it, and you resisted.
God did. Yeah. And I resisted.
Okay, and then
Philip kept saying that. And so I was like, finally one weekend, I was like, I'm going to have a conversation with him. I need to be obedient and just tell him that I'm sensing God saying, hey, full-time ministry is in your future. So I met with Pastor and told him that. We just met at the coffee shop, Starbucks inside of Barnes & Noble. And I said, hey, I'm the type of person, I would love to be able to sit down with you and tell you this is what it all looks like, but I have absolutely no idea. I know that my next step of obedience is just to tell you that I'm sensing God drawing me into full-time ministry. It scares me. I have no idea what it looks like, but I need to tell you that. And he goes, yeah, that's on you. Like he spoke it right there in that moment. I see that in you. And I was
It's
like,
great when somebody confirms.
oh, I was like, what? Yeah, I thought I had this figured out. You know, you're supposed to say, nope, it's not on you. But he spoke it right there in that moment. And it was about 2 years after that the Rock had approached me and said that they had a position that was opening up.
2 years after the
after.
seeds planted is when you
years.
finally say, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and you used this word in the email, the response. I remember I read it just this morning, and the word surrender just kept popping up over and over and over again. So you finally surrendered to it, and here you are.
Yeah.
And so then, and I want to get to this part because I have questions surrounding this. Your husband gets COVID.
Yeah.
Talk us through it.
Yep. May need Kleenexes. We'll see how this goes.
Here, hold on.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Timeline one more time. December 1st came on staff. By January 6th, he had passed away. And so I surrendered everything. I said, I'm all in. I'm going to work for your kingdom, however you want to use me. And then my husband passes. And I'd be lying if I wasn't like, what the heck, God?
Okay,
like,
so that's my question.
Yeah.
It's like, because I had this with Nina. I was like, wait a second, hold on. I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to do. I'm leading my family. Every little thing that you're telling me to be obedient to, I'm being obedient to. And then
this happens.
And then a second child,
Yeah.
and I was just like, what? I mean, I didn't want to, because when I lost my first one, I was like, I don't want to hear nothing about God.
Right.
I don't want to hear any, don't even bring that up to me. Just keep that to yourself, right?
Yeah.
And with Nina, I felt myself wanting to go that way, but obviously I'm more spiritually discerned at this point.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, here's the deal. I'm pissed. I love you. I'm going to be obedient, but I don't want to. You know what I mean? And you know, I was kind of like the young kid stomping, you know, when mom and dad tells them something and you're like, fine, you know, and that's kind of how I was posturing. And then through obedience, everything started to change, obviously.
Yeah.
So did you have that feeling where you were like, come on, what the hell?
Yeah. Yeah.
I make a commitment, and you're immediately putting me under this pressure
Yeah.
of the loss of a loved one.
Yeah. It was definitely had that emotion. I will tell you that it was very quick lived.
It didn't last long,
It
right?
didn't because I knew I had heard something early on that we have an option. First of all, anything that we face in life is an opportunity for refining by our Father, right? So I knew in that moment, this is a big deal. He has the opportunity to come in and refine me, refine my family, refine my influence, right? And so I understood that. But bigger than that is in those moments, you have a choice. You're going to either mourn into his presence or you're going to mourn into unbelief. And I mourned into his presence. And let me tell you, the affection of heaven and the nearness of God that I've experienced in the last 2 years, we're coming up on 2 years on January 6th, it'll be 2 years. It's like nothing I've ever experienced in my life. It's an actual gift. And it's only by the grace of God that I'm able to say that, but suffering is a gift.
You'd said that in your email, and I do want to get to that
Yeah.
because I was like, I want to dissect that comment, but I think we also need to tell the audience, how did your husband pass?
Yeah. So that's layered, but we don't have enough time to kind of talk through all that. But here's what I will tell you.
30,000 square foot view.
Okay. So we actually, tons of us all got COVID at the exact same time. So December 13th is when he tested positive for COVID. And he was totally fine. First couple of days, I was also totally fine. But then we all got really sick. Like we had this like little grace period where we were okay. And then all of a sudden it was not okay. And he was running high fevers. I wasn't. So there was definitely just some distinctions about what he was, like his side effects that were different than mine. It was hitting his body harder. And by Christmas Eve, so this time of year, today's the 22nd, this time of year is tough.
Oh, God, yeah.
It's marked by this experience in my world, but by the grace of God, I can also see the beauty in it. You know, one of the very last things we did together was wrap Christmas presents on my living room floor for a family in need for the Rock. That's like one of our, like, I can choose to see that, or I can choose to see the death or the grief touching these moments. I choose to see the beauty, you know, and that's, again, only the grace of God that will allow me to see the beauty in all of it. So he went into the hospital on December 24th, and so Christmas Eve. And once he was in the hospital, this is where it gets pretty complicated. We lost like pretty much all of our rights. What he wanted to take, they wouldn't allow him. What he didn't
He probably wanted monoclonal antibodies?
completely, and they wouldn't give it to him unless he was meeting these specific data points. So like his issue, he was meeting all the things except for the inflammation levels. And it's not like this was in shortage. They should have given it to him. It could have saved his life. But
Probably wanted to give him what, remdesivir?
They wanted to give him remdesivir. And we told them from the very beginning, it's one of the first phone calls I made on his chart, no remdesivir. We're not doing it. We've read all about it. We went and educated. We know that it's shutting down his organs. No remdesivir, no vent. We're not doing it. We were very clear on it. And I wasn't allowed to go in and see him ever. So he died alone, which is pretty heartbreaking. But once again, we lost all rights. So he goes in, I go home. And from that point on, every interaction is on FaceTime. So I'm seeing and hearing the nurses coming in. And even though on the chart we've said, hey, we're not doing these things, the nurses are coming in and saying, hey, are you sure you don't want this? They've got that little, those little white things, those little white containers that have the pills in it. Are you sure you don't want the remdesivir? Are you sure you don't want it? And he had enough mind about him at the beginning that he's like, no, I don't want it. No, I don't want it. But they were not listening. And then the things he was asking for, we don't do that here. We don't do that here. And
did you ever call around to other hospitals? Because I know people have gotten monoclonal antibodies.
So he ended up getting it the night before he went on the vent.
They finally gave it to him.
But not because of any other reason besides me asking every single day And as soon as his inflammation level went over that marker, I can't remember. It seems like the number was 60 is the number I'm remembering in my head. It had to surpass that. I'm like, give it to him. And that night, it was really cool. I shared something at church this past weekend about how the whole staff came together and we prayed toward his window because they put a heart in the window. The nurses did. So we knew where to stretch our hands. I went there daily, but the entire staff came, staff and spouses came and all of that. So that all happened like within the 24-hour range of him getting the antibody treatment as well as him getting put onto the vent. But that night after he had the antibody treatment, it took place at like 2:00 in the afternoon. It was 8:00 at night and we had the laptop sitting up on the living room floor and all the kids are over and he's got a BiPAP on and he's asking just how's school going. He's talking to the kids and he, looked at me and he said, I feel different. Like he was feeling better. And, that same night, 2:00 in the morning, the nurses called me and they said, we have to put him on the vent. He's not going to make it. Has to go on the vent. We're completely confused. Like,
what was his O2 sats on the BiPAP?
At that point, 90s, he was statting fine.
So why do they want to vent him?
Exactly. But I'm not there. Like, we did not know what to do. Like, Chris and I, my husband and I were trying to make this decision over the phone. He's panicking. You know, he's a strong man. Like,
That's scary.
Yeah, we were scared. The way that people described him at his funeral was a man of quiet strength. So he was, 6'2", 230, very quiet, brilliant. You would never know how smart he was because he was so quiet.
Do you want me to go get some?
No, I think I'm okay.
I feel like
If you want to, go for it.
Hold on.
Okay.
Give me 1 second. So his O2 sats are in the 90s, yet they still want to vent him.
Yeah.
And then what was their excuse for that one?
The explanation was I don't even know if I can explain it well enough for it to make sense. There was a different stat they were looking at, which was like his hemoglobin levels.
Hemoglobin, okay.
And his and how the oxygen was attaching.
Right. So hemoglobin is what carries oxygen throughout the body.
Correct.
Right. So if his hemoglobin levels are low, I don't understand. Like you would think there's a correlation between O2 sat and hemoglobin.
Right.
So
That's
like
what we kept saying. He has a daughter who's she's 30. Gosh, Ashley, forgive me if you listen to this. I think she's 34. And I'm on the phone with Ashley trying to figure out what to do. I'm talking to my husband trying to figure out what to do. I mean, we just did not know what to do. And we finally just said, okay, like I wasn't there.
I got to tell you, luckily I'm in the field that I'm in and I know tons of doctors.
Yeah.
When you're in a situation, take COVID out of the equation.
Yeah.
If you don't have someone that has a clue and can advocate, you are a sitting duck in these situations.
Yeah.
I mean,
it was so chaotic.
Because I mean, even like when my dad was in the hospital and my dad had he had his prostate removed, and then he ended up having a heart attack.
Oops, sorry guys.
Are you really? No. So he had a heart attack right when he came out, and he was intubated for a couple of days before he finally passed. But if we didn't have someone that we could call, a family friend, a physician that came up, read the chart, and went to bat for us.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a sitting duck.
Yeah.
You're just a sitting duck. So, they're looking at the hemoglobin. There's another marker they're looking at that's making them want to intubate him.
Yeah, and they're telling us this is the only option. And so we collectively made the decision to do it. And I'm on FaceTime the entire time. So they come in these ridiculous hazmat suits. Like it was insane.
Right. Yeah,
because
I know.
he wasn't vaccinated. Am I allowed to say
Yeah,
that on here?
Yeah, you can. Because here, the vaccine is this like the dumbest of days long,
I'm
right?
like...
Well, here's my... I don't want to say that. The concept that the vaccine protects someone other than the vaccinated is so god darn stupid.
Yeah.
It's just stupid.
Yeah.
I'm like, so I remember when I owned Core Physical Therapy, and I have no problem saying it. We'd have people come in and say, I'm only being treated by a vaccinated therapist. And I'd say, I can't help you.
Yeah. So
I don't know who's vaccinated, and I ain't asking, and go someplace else because you're an idiot.
I will tell you that the way he was treated was completely different because of that. Again, I'm on FaceTime the entire time, and different nurses and people would come in, and the first question they'd always ask, are you vaccinated? And he would say no. And you would watch the disgust on their face. Like they'd shake their head. They would just cease to communicate with him at that point, because why build a relationship, or why try and make this man feel comfortable? Or, I mean, it was insane. You could watch their countenance and their language shift as soon as he said he wasn't vaccinated.
It's weird because being a first responder, you start learning about the fatigue that goes into that. And during that time, obviously COVID was exhausting for first responders. Now, I'm not defending their behavior, because I think needs to be coping mechanisms built in place to understand that you're getting compassion fatigue, and that you're treating people inhumane because of their vaccination status.
Right.
And I think during COVID, a lot of nurses were like so cut and dry, exhausted, worn out, that people started getting treated like they were, just animals, and it's crap.
Yeah.
And I'm really sorry you guys had to deal with that. Gosh, that I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
especially from a distance when you're only on FaceTime, that you can't, sit there and get eye to eye with somebody and say, hey, listen, you're out of line. You can kind of say that with your expression a lot of times. When somebody's, speaking that, you're like, the way you express, they're out of line. You can communicate with that, and their tone will shift. This way, it's so impersonal that people start just becoming robotic. And
I had a physician tell me, it was so funny to hear him say this. He said, the vaccine protects someone else like me wearing a seatbelt protects someone else in my car if we get in a car accident. He's like, it does, it's stupid. And here, like I said, getting the vaccine, do what you want, right? I'm not saying that the vaccine is stupid. I'm not. I don't care what you do, right? But to this concept, it infuriates me.
Right.
Like, oh, I got to get the vaccine because I have someone at home who I need to protect. Well, then let them get the vaccine, So anyway, I could go down that rabbit hole, and I'm just going to make my blood pressure. My blood pressure will go up. But anyway, so yeah, I get it. So then now they intubate him with you on FaceTime.
Yes. So they're, again, ridiculous hazmat suits, and an image I think I already mentioned, I'm a visual person. So, I mean, I see, like, God speaks to me and, like visions and dreams, and I experience life in shapes and colors and pictures. It's just the way I'm wired. And so I will never forget this image. Straight out of a movie, but like, he's got the phone right here, and you can see all these people in these hazmat suits pushing him to the intubation room. And someone realizes that we're on the phone, and they were like, hey, someone's on FaceTime. And so the guy picks up the phone, speaking to me through his mask thing that he's got on. It's like they look like they were going to space. I mean, it was insane. And he said, hey, you can't be on here. You're gonna have to hang up. And he handed the phone back to my husband. And I looked at him and I said, do you have peace, to my husband? And the very last time I saw his eyes, he said, no. And then the phone went off. So that's burned in my memory forever. So we both went into it just not, we didn't know what we were doing. It was so crazy. And it all happened in that same night. He's like, I feel different, and we're kind of celebrating as a family on FaceTime. And then just a couple hours later, we're trying to figure out what the heck to do in this crazy, chaotic moment from FaceTime. And he has no peace. They intubate him, and then he never came off the vent.
What date did they intubate him?
I don't know. Actually, okay. I don't know what day it was. I don't know the date. It was probably 6 days in.
So he was intubated for 6 days?
Probably. Well, he was in the hospital for 2 weeks. So it was probably halfway through the hospital stay that
I'm sure he completely lost track of all time.
Yeah.
In space.
So between Christmas Eve, he goes into the hospital and dies January
6th.
January 6th.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So, oh my God. And at what point did he pass while intubated, or was there something that they did that made you guys say, turn the machine off?
He passed while intubated. Again, some of this stuff doesn't make sense. A lot of the COVID stuff doesn't make sense, but they had called me and said he's not making it through the night. He was in this state called tachycardia. Are you familiar with that?
I know what it is.
So
Yeah.
his heart rate would go to like 180 and then dip to 80 and then back to 1. I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah.
What was going on with his body. And so he was in this consistent state of tachycardia. He was also, due to the treatment, like if I could say that, I would tell you that COVID is not what took my husband's life. It was the treatment that took my husband's life. Yeah. And the death certificate says COVID, but it also says renal failure. So he was on dialysis as well at this point.
So you had to dialyze him?
I mean, just crazy, but it's all the treatment. Like he didn't go in with organs that were failing. He went in healthy.
Did they ever give him remdesivir?
As far as I can tell, no. I just got his medical records. And I'm making my way through them. So I've done like a first pass. There's tons on there that I don't understand, but I never saw in the 113 pages, I never saw the word remdesivir or remdesivir.
Whatever it is. I don't know. I may be saying it wrong.
Who knows? One of us have it right. How about that? And so his body was definitely shutting down, but they had called me that night and said, he's not going to make it. So they were granting me permission. I just kept asking, can I come up now? Can I come? I mean, daily I'm asking, can I come in? And they keep telling me no. And I actually had to work through this with my grief counselor. So like, first of all, if anybody's listening to this is going through grief, get yourself a grief counselor. Like they are paramount. And
it's a big deal.
It's been life-changing for me to have somebody to be able to work through these things with, because grief is
got to give us
your movement.
Your person's name, because ours is retiring.
I will. She's amazing. But we went through all of these like what if statements. Like, what if I would have just been like, screw you, I'm kicking down the door, this is my husband? Or what if I would have said,
they'd have arrested you?
They would have.
Yeah, they'd have arrested you.
But you have to
been
work
on the news.
Completely. Like some other people were.
Yeah.
But in grief, you really have to move through those what ifs. What ifs, it's a real thing. And in life in general, you have what ifs, you know?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I could go on and on about ours, so I get it.
Yeah.
You know.
And so I had to go through, what if we didn't put him on the vent? What if I would have fought that? And so my grief counselor's like, okay, let's walk through that. What if you did? You didn't. And he died that night. How'd you feel about that? You would have been saying, what if I just would have put him on the vent? I'm like, what if we didn't go to the hospital? Okay, let's walk through that what if. What if you would have just said no to the hospital and he died in your living room that night? You'd be saying, what if I would have gone to the hospital?
Yeah.
I mean, that is the
nature
of what ifs.
You were going to be in a what if scenario
Regardless.
no matter what.
Regardless.
No matter what position you were in, right? You're stuck with the what if. Anytime you lose a loved one other than what I would call how do I want to say it? Someone who lived a long life, like a timely passing, right?
Yeah.
Chronologically correct, I guess we could say, right? Like they live their life, they're in their 80s, and they pass away.
Lived a full life, yeah.
They lived a full life. Right. Anytime you lose someone prior to that, you have what ifs.
Completely.
And I'll even go a step further. Anytime you lose at anything, you're always saying, well, what if I would have done this? Because we all want to keep our loved ones. We all want everybody to be happy and healthy. And it's like, no matter what you're in, you're always going to second guess when you're not standing in victory.
Yeah.
But with Chris and you unpacking the what ifs with your grief counselor, how did your faith grow? How, what was spoken to you through in those moments? Do you have any, solid time markers that where God shared things to you as you were as you've been navigating the grief process?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay.
'Cause I'm looking at your email because there's something that I want to touch on that's going to what you're saying.
Okay.
Man, I will say there's a lot. God is so present and so well acquainted with our grief and so well acquainted with suffering. He suffered, right? And back to what I said earlier, making that conscious choice to mourn into his presence was one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. The last 2 years with God has been nothing short of a miracle, but also just so beautiful.
When you say mourn into his presence, and I think there's going to be people out there listening who are grieving and figuring out how that looks, what practical steps can somebody do when you're leaning in and mourning into God's presence?
Yep. Being with him. There's times where God is actually calling us to just be, to just camp. He wants us to sit in that grief with him. We're never grieving alone. He's always grieving with us. So creating that space to just sit in it with him.
Just reflecting, kind of meditating on the word and just kind of being present, saying, here, I'm seeking the communication connection that your word, that's in your word, download into me how I'm supposed to work through this.
Right. And journaling and worshiping. I mean, something that Pastor Phillips says often is, don't forget to declare in the dark what you proclaimed in the light.
That's
and
good.
So I had
That'll
to,
preach.
It will. I had to go back to my journal. I actually shared this with the team, but I had to go back to my journal because I couldn't remember what the heck I was proclaiming in the light. I couldn't remember the light. All I saw was dark. And so I had to go back and look at my journal. I'm so grateful that I journal, but I was able to go back and see like me declaring how good he was and how beautiful he was, and for the protection and for him going before and him going behind and him surrounding me and for him leading me and all the things. And so even when I did not believe it, I declared it. So I would declare, you are good. I would worship, you are good. And not saying that I didn't believe that he was good, but I was questioning everything. It's like, what is good at this point, And
You declare it and he confirms it.
yes. Yeah.
Here it is.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I want you to finish it.
So you declare it and he confirms it. As you're journaling, your conscious state of mind was, I'm going to pour in and connect. And I'm sure other things came out in that as well. Was it difficult for you to release animosity towards how Chris was treated and the treatment plan that was given to him? Was it difficult for you to release that animosity? And if so, biblically, what was kind of triggered or brought out from you releasing that animosity?
That's really great question. I'm still actually moving through that piece.
Yeah, you could see that.
I would say I get pretty fired up. And I would say picking up the medical records here recently, of course, has uncovered a lot of just emotions that I didn't know that I still had. There's been intentionality on my part to forgive and to release this. I don't want to harbor unforgiveness in my life. I understand that when you harbor unforgiveness in your heart, it's not self-contained. It touches every part of your life. It touches the way you experience life, the way that you treat people, the way that you move about life. And so it will wreck you. So I understand that. So again, intentional at releasing and forgiving and asking for the grace to release and forgive. But picking up the medical records here recently really brought some stuff up where it's like, oh, I've got more work to do, and we call it heart work, not hard work. I mean, heart work is hard work, but you have to do the heart work. I mean, if you think of your heart as a garden, I mean, if anybody is listening and has a garden, you can go to sleep and then there's no weeds and you wake up the next morning, there's like a 2-foot tall weed. And you're like, where did you come from? Our hearts are the same. And Holy Spirit's super gentle and knows when we're ready to move through things. So we're not going to move through all of grief in one day. We're going to move through grief in different seasons. And so I'm at year 2 and now I'm moving through a different element of grief that I have yet to move through. And so
talk to me about this comment. Suffering is a gift. God entrusted me with it.
Yeah.
How did you come to that space? Right? I mean, that's a comment I don't really understand, and I've went through a lot. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I want to see that through your lenses.
I mean, it doesn't matter how many times you read Job. I mean, like, it's difficult to get to that, to own that statement.
Yeah. I mean it though. I mean, with all my heart, I believe that suffering is a gift. So, First of all, I believe that God rescued my husband. He spoke that to me midsummer, this past summer, that he rescued him. I don't even know what that means, but I find so much rest and comfort in it. I was on a run.
Yeah, because in your mind, what you remember is, are you at peace? No. And when you said that to me, I think, but God.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't think he was alone, and I don't think he suffered.
Right. Yeah, he rescued him. So maybe on the other side of this, Scripture tells us that we know in part and we see in part. And so I know this much, like just a small amount of what's actually happening. I mean, I pray daily for supernatural eyes. Like I don't want to see with natural eyes. I want to see with supernatural eyes. I want to see beyond what my but finite mind can see. But I believe that whatever that rescue is, it could have been, maybe he would have, like the quality of life would have been horrible. Or maybe he would have never walked again. I don't know. I mean, his entire body was shutting down. And so I believe that he rescued him. And here's the deal. When I raise my hand at church on the weekends and I'm declaring that he's a healer, he is a healer. He healed my husband. It's just, he didn't heal him on this side of heaven.
Yeah.
But my husband is whole and well and before the presence of God. Like, I can't wait to get there. I can only imagine the beauty that he gets to be a part of. And I'm actually grateful that he is where he's at. Like, it's only by the grace of God can I say I'm grateful for my husband passing. And I hope people hear my heart with that. I'm grateful for where he's at. I'm grateful that God put this divine rescue plan in place that I get to see him again, that he's whole, he's well, he's healed before our Father. Like, that's amazing to me. That's that's the kindness of our Father.
And knowing that Chris knew Jesus,
yes,
and had a relationship,
yes,
and walked it out. That's got to bring peace to you.
It brings extreme peace.
So,
the suffering being a gift. Yeah. Okay. So, it kind of goes back to the statement of declaring in the dark what you proclaim in the light. It's very easy to declare how good God is when things are okay. Of course, he's good. Life is good. But when things are hard, can he trust me as his daughter to continue to mourn into his presence or lean into his presence? Can he trust me as his daughter to declare that he is good? Can he trust me as his daughter to take these things, like the Scripture tells us that what the enemy takes for evil, God will make good. But God is partnering with us to make those things good. He's the ultimate person bringing that.
yeah.
He's going to partner with me to bring forth good out of this. And he's entrusted me with that. So does that make sense? Does that answer?
Well, no, because now it does. You because I remember, like, every morning I'd get up and because I had Alexa right next to me, and while I was making my breakfast, I'd say, "Alexa, play worship," and then I would listen. I'd make my breakfast. I usually would read some scripture, whatever I did. Okay, Nina dies. Okay, and the next day I was like, I don't want to do this today. You know what I mean? This isn't what I want to do today. And I'm like, you know what? I ain't doing it.
Right.
Two times this happens to me. I'm not doing it. And for whatever reason, I was obedient. And
But he trusted you. See, that's what the beauty is.
right. I didn't want to do this.
Well, thank you for joining me, and you're going to make me cry. But
No,
how
because-
beautiful is that?
No, but so I'm obedient to it, right? I do exactly what I did the day before, and the day before that, and the day before that. I did exactly what I did. And you know what song? The song that came on, I will never forget the lyrics to it. I will never forget the lyrics to it. Said, you praise on the mountain, you praise when the mountain's in the way, and we got to edit this part out.
Oh, we're leaving it in. We're leaving it in.
Got to edit this part out. You praise on the mountain, praise when the mountain's in the way. He's the heaven where your feet are, so praise in the valley is all the same.
Yeah.
And so I was like, what the hell, And yeah, so I get it. I get it, but you have to be obedient in order to
Yes.
to see that.
Yeah. And it's a obedience, and then by the grace of God, like he gave you the strength to make it through that. He's continuing to give me the strength. Anything that I'm saying it, like the words suffering is a gift, or I'm grateful for my husband's passing. All of those things are revelation from God. And he trusted me, and he trusted you, and he's trusted anybody that is working through suffering to steward that suffering in such a way that it's going to bring him glory and also advance his kingdom and bring forth other lives that are going to be drawn by the power of our testimony, who are going to ultimately surrender their life to Jesus. Like, what a big deal. Like the author and finisher of our faith, the Alpha and the Omega, the God of the universe says, I trust you with this. I know that you're going to steward it well. And I know that people's lives are going to be changed because of it. That's insane to me.
Yeah.
That's why it's a gift.
Yeah. And I always just looked at it as like, okay, what's behind, you never know what's behind his obedience. Like, what is he going to reveal to me?
Yeah.
Because like I said, I was that kid. I was like the kid who was stomping to his room, just doing what his mom said, but didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
And that's the way I was. I was like, whatever, I'm going to do it. Right. And then finally I said, I'm not even going to, because normally I'm always doing something, but that day I just sat and just listened. I might not even know what song was playing.
Yeah.
I just wanted it like fill in the room. And I sat there and listened to it. And I was like, wow, okay. All right. I feel like he spoke to me through that, he spoke to me through a lot of different things, but that song right there, it's like, hey, you don't get to just do this when things just going well.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's easy.
Right.
Anyone can do that.
Yep.
So when I'm having a conversation with Pastor Philip, it was after Dad passed, and we've had some untimely, abrupt deaths, leading up with our nephew, my nephew Frank's son, and now my dad, and I'm just trying to wrap my head around the why God would take a child, a good man, husband, father, such as Chris, my dad, Nina passing, and he said something to me that really resonated. Pastor Philip said something to me. He said, you're thinking in terms of linear time. You're on this earth for, if you're lucky, 80 plus years. But when you start thinking biblical, you start realizing that eternity dwarfs just linear time. So the time spent here is really just a small, not even a blip in the grand scheme of what eternity is.
Yeah.
And knowing that you're spending eternity with the Father, that should lead peace. That it doesn't matter 4 or 104. Eternity is still going to dwarf that time, and so it just to me kind of brought me a little peace to understand, like, just because God does these untimely early passings in our lives doesn't mean that he's angry or it's not a vengeful kind of thing.
Right.
We have to walk through it and work through it, but eternity is his promise, and that's what we need to focus on.
Yeah.
Well, and he made a couple comments to me that kind of freed me from some lies, when Nina passed, that I had been carrying since Andrew Ross had passed. One of them was, God took Andrew, and he was like, God didn't take Andrew. God doesn't take anyone.
Yeah.
He's like, he receives everyone. He doesn't take anyone. Yes. He said, cancer took Andrew. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Nina accidentally taking a pill, took Nina. Nina, God didn't take Nina, and he receives everyone. That was one thing.
That's big.
I've heard him say
it was
that.
huge because what happens is, and sometimes even like, a priest may say it, or, someone who, I guess you could say a church elder, right? Someone who's further down their spiritual walk than you are may use that phrase in a sermon, when God took so-and-so, when God took so-and-so, when God brought so-and-so home. It's like, because then what happens is then you will blame God for it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When it's actually not God that did that at all. You know, and then the other thing that he said is you'll be with them a lot longer in heaven than you'll be without them on earth.
Right.
And I was like, okay, those are two things that kind of immediately, you know, that I didn't have when Andrew Ross died because I didn't want to hear it.
Sure.
I was too pissed off. You know what I mean? And I had no discernment.
Anger's blinding.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so I didn't want to listen to it at all.
I have to say something because I absolutely love how much our pastor's name is being brought up in this. So we're all three talking about, you know, grief and moving through it and just how to navigate it. And a commonality amongst the three of us is the fact that we are connected to a local body.
Yes.
We're connected to the local church.
Right.
And so there's things like you're using the word, which is a powerful word, that this was freeing to you, right? So without you being connected to a local church, without you having a pastor that you are sitting under the teaching, without going to weekly services, like this is one of the things, talking about mourning into presence. I missed one service. And then I kept going. But I mean, I didn't even know how to worship, but I would show up right at the beginning of worship. I'd have my hat down. I'd stand. I would weep the entire time. I'd leave right like when Pastor Philip would stand up, so I didn't have to talk to everybody.
Because you don't want to.
Kept showing up.
It.
I kept showing up.
We did the same thing.
Yeah.
We did because some of it's like you just don't want. You don't ask me any questions. Just let me be here.
Yes.
You know, and honestly, like one of the first prayers he prayed when Nina passed was protect him from the stupid things people are going to try to say to him or going to say to him to try to make him feel better.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh man. And I remember there were so many times where I'd have to grab Michelle and be like, don't listen to that. Don't listen to that.
Yeah, don't receive that.
Do not let that enter into your spirit, you know, and people mean well. But here, if you're listening to this, when you're going through something like that and you're walking through a wake, if you say anything other than, I'm sorry, I'm here if you need me, it's probably stupid.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, seriously, from someone who lost a husband, for someone who's lost two kids, if you're saying anything other than, I'm sorry, and I'm here if you need me, you're probably saying something stupid. Okay, that's it. I just want you to know that. I just want you to know that.
Yeah,
That'll make
also,
the lines go so much quicker too.
I think the amount of time people had asked me, is there anything I can do for you? I'm like, I have no idea. Like, I don't know. And the most special, I'm going to mention my friend Christy O'Reilly. She's one of my closest friends. And she just showed up. She was texting me like, hey, can I come over? Hey, can I do this? Hey, I mean, I think it was like the day after. She was one of the first people there the morning of, but I think it was the day after. And I was like, no, I'm fine. She showed up.
I think
was
that's
one
a
of
great-
the best moments ever. She showed up the way she was supposed to show up, her presence, and it was just presence. She wasn't trying to fix anything. It was just her presence. And that was so powerful to me.
Here, and here's what people don't understand. The question that seems very benign, excuse me, is there anything I can do for you? But that all of a sudden puts something on your plate.
But I need to make a decision. Like, what is it that
know
I
what
need in this moment?
When you're brain dead
Yeah.
at this point.
No idea.
You know, and it's like, you know what? And so that's something that I've learned from my own experience. I don't ever ask. I just go.
Yeah.
I just
Step
go and
up
just bring something,
bring
whatever. I
help
don't
'em.
care.
Just
You know?
show up.
Yep.
Showing up is shows the person, you know, this is other stuff is just lip service. I'm here for you.
Yeah.
And whether you like it or not, if I could read on your face that you're like, I don't need you around here right now. Okay, just take the social cues as well. Sometimes people need space.
Nonverbals tells you a lot more than what comes out of their mouth sometimes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But just showing up, I think that's a beautiful thing, and just kind of stepping up and just, hey, I'm here, and you can push me out, or you can let me sit in it with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was powerful enough that I'm mentioning it 2 years later. It was a moment that I needed her there, but I didn't know that I needed her there. And she knew, and she was sensitive to that. And she just showed up. She walked right in the front door, took her shoes off, and she's like, I know you told me you didn't need me here, but here I am. And it was exactly what I needed in that moment.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, here, I think, you know, we need to. I'd like to see like what from all your experiences, if you can come up with, you know, the single. What advice would you give someone? You know, from someone who went from addicted with no Jesus, encounters Jesus, to now is in full-time ministry and can sit here and say, I'm thankful for the suffering that I have. You know, what advice would you give someone to be able to help them take that step?
Yeah.
Someone who's listening to this saying, "Hey, I can't ever become what she's became." What would you say to that person?
I didn't become who I am. First of all, just to answer the last question, I didn't become who I am on my own, like at all.
Right.
Apart from God, I'm nothing. I mean, Scripture tells us that apart from God, we are but filthy rags.
Right.
And so we all have a lot of different problems, a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different addictions, a lot of different hurts, a lot of different roots that need to be uprooted, a lot of different lies and lenses that we move through life from. But we all have the exact same answer. And the answer is Jesus. Like different problem, same solution. He is the only reason I am sitting here having this conversation with you guys today. He is the only reason that my family, like we have defied all odds. Having a kid as a teenager, my son should not be at the Rock serving Jesus, married to a Christian woman. God's at the center of their marriage. None of that should have happened. Same with my daughter, because that's not what statistic tells you. I was an IV drug user. Statistic tells you that most of the people, it's like 74% of people don't make it out of that. So you've got 20%.
I'm shocked that it's that low.
That was the statistics then. That was 20 years ago. I haven't looked at the statistics now. It's probably completely different now.
Yeah.
But none of it, the overcoming, the position I'm in, the influence that I have, all the different things is literally because Jesus is the center of my world.
I think, like, I was thinking about this today as I was reading, what you sent, and I'm thinking about previous guests and like my own story and your story. It's like Jesus is the devil's catch-22.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's like there is no way that he can reveal himself to you without God being revealed as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's just no way. And so I think it's amazing because it's like the people who have went through the darkest seem to have so much more faith once they see the light.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's because I know so many people who, they've been fortunate, they haven't had a whole lot happen to them. And it's like the one who's had that late night conversation with the devil, more than one time, and has had life deal them that crap hand. It's like those folks are the ones, once they see the light, that they're the most dangerous to the devil.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I remember someone saying, it's like an arrow. You get pulled back. The further you get pulled back, the further you're going to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's great imagery.
Let's talk about, and this is kind of piggybacking on Frank's question, the resources that are available. Obviously the word, the Bible, reading it, I'd like to say to somebody who's going through something, get a text that you can understand, that's not in a well, I think King James version is probably the most difficult to read. So get a text that you can understand.
Yes, yeah.
So what's being translated is being translated to in a language, even though that is English, that you can completely and totally understand.
Yeah.
I think getting patched into a church, the Rock of KC is all church that we love. The doors are always open.
Yeah.
And you walk in there, and you're going to walk in there to some friendly faces of people who are, you're going to walk into somebody like Devon.
Yeah.
But what other resources might you add to those two that might help somebody in their struggle?
Yeah.
Books outside of the Bible, like that might, I don't want to say dumb it down, but I will say just unpack it a little bit better, to where it's easier to understand. I mean, we've spoke about Discover Freedom on here, and that's a program at the Rock. But is there any other resources that you would say, grab this might speak to you?
Yeah. So speaking of scripture, I know you said outside of the Bible, but there's an app that we know, obviously, as Christians, but called the YouVersion Bible app. And this Bible app is gold. I mean, it is absolutely incredible for a multitude of reasons, but the bigger reasons for somebody who's just like, what does it even mean to get before God? What is this whole Christian walk? Like, how do I even talk to him? All the different things. You can go onto there and it is like Netflix where you can find anything and everything. So you go into the YouVersion Bible app and you can search, let's say you're struggling with depression or you're struggling with like, how do I talk to God? Or you're like, what in the world is prayer? Like, does it need to look a certain way? Or can I just talk to him while I'm driving? Do I need to be in a quiet, dark room? Do my hands need to be pressed together? All the things that like, you just don't know, as you're stepping into this. And so you can look up anything in their search function and find a Bible study that is biblically based, that is going to walk you through that.
Yeah.
The other really great thing about that app is that it has all the different versions on there. So let's say you're reading through the New International Version along with the New Living Translation. So NIV and NLT are very, very easy to read. They read like you and I talk today, like our everyday vernacular. But let's say you're wanting to go a little bit deeper. You're trying to understand the context of the scripture, or it's just the way that the words are flowing. Is it making sense? You can highlight it, and there's a little button down below that says compare, and you can read it in all the different versions right there.
Yeah.
And so you're getting a fuller picture and context of what it is that you are reading.
And so,
It
like,
takes you into deeper understanding.
For me, my reading comprehension is elementary, so I have to listen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know,
and it allows that too.
I mean, right? Because
does
when I
allow
have my
that.
Bible app, I just hit a button and it reads it for me.
Yeah.
Because I'll read a paragraph and be like, "What the hell did I just read?" And then I got to read it again, and I could lose myself again. So I have to actually listen to it.
And they have that.
And it's much better for me that way.
I think for folks who want a really great plan and I think that it kind of walks in step with the YouVersion, but there's a study called Experiencing God by Henry Blackaby, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a daily study where there's journaling involved and question sets involved. It's a little bit more in depth, but the process of experiencing God to understand how that relationship works is really kind of deep rooted in that study. And I would suggest that to anybody who just wants a plan that they can, it's not a checklist like I got to do this today. Yet it's something that you're saying, well, after the first year, because people are going to be listening to this after the first of the year, you want to get something that gets you on a good start. Take on the task of picking up that Experiencing God workbook and work through that.
Yeah,
thing. It really is. I've done it, and
I think like the easiest way, like, because I would say the last 10 years is when I really said, okay, I'm going to surrender my life. Okay. And even then I still have to, I find myself like, wait a second, you said you surrendered
It's
yourself
daily.
and then here you are fighting.
and you take it back. You're like, oh, it's at your feet again. Oh, let me have that back.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're unconsciously taking it back,
And sometimes consciously, yes.
Yeah. And I think the thing that if I'm going to dummy this down, and I don't want to use the word dummy, but like to really simplify it, it's like, here, if you don't know what the first step is, I would tell you to understand what the enemy is going to always try and do. He's always going to try to separate. So to combat that, I would say to someone listening to this, get connected somewhere.
Yes.
yeah.
I would say get connected somewhere for no other reason than there's going to be a time that you're going to go through and your faith is going to be crap and you can piggyback off someone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I genuinely stand on the prayers of the people of the Rock.
Yeah.
Like I would say my strength, my ability to make it through year one of grief wouldn't have happened without me being connected. And obviously being the connections director, I mean, I could preach this all day. We are hardwired and designed by our Father to connect. And in the digital age,
Which makes sense why he wants to separate.
Yes. Like the enemy totally wants to isolate us.
Right.
And so not only does he isolate, he distracts us. Like, sit down and try and read your Bible and see how many different distractions come.
Here,
Sunday morning, we got to go to church, see what happens. The kids are screaming. Life is falling apart. And but get
how
there,
about when you
make
have
room,
your
no
hands
excuses.
around your child's throat on the way there? And then you got to walk in, and like some people show up and it's super Christian. I don't. I show up, I'm pissed. I'm like,
so
get these
funny.
kids away from me. Go put them in the back and let me sit by myself for an hour and a half.
There's kind of a joke that the pavement walking into the church is like magical ground. All of a sudden, like, you're losing your mind on the way there, and then you hit the pavement, and everything's like, oh, see my beautiful kids, like everything's great. But
No,
But here, if you come in with something, don't be scared. Share it, because we're all dealing with stuff.
every single one of us.
Yeah, it's going to church to be with community is not necessarily just a place for the well, but it's for the sick, and we all deal with stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And that community is, you can guarantee somebody in that community is dealing with what you are dealing with, or is on the other side of that. And so, knowing that, just trusting in God's going to put that person around you when you need it, when you're patched into that community, it does happen.
Right. Go ahead.
I kind of wanted to talk about the word surrender, because I feel like that might be a tough concept for a lot of people to wrap their mind in, and how that looks. And so I'll speak to how I interpret that, and then I'd like to, I want to know how you guys interpret the word surrender too, because we've all had to do it in order to get to this place. But for me, surrender, you have to take your ego and say, get out of my way. What you're physically surrendering is your ego, and that best. I mean, I think, you can look all around and see the evil that the devil's doing. And when we're speaking to surrender, and speaking about temptation, I think we're willful individuals. That's who we are. We want, just by nature, you don't have to teach a kid no. They already know when they're born, and you say, here, you eat this. No. Or you don't have to teach them mine. They kind of pick up that on their own. And so, like,
surrender's not innate. Like,
elaborate, please.
Well, what I'm saying to you, like what you just said it. I just
The
said it differently.
selfishness
Like,
and the sin.
He's
is
using big
innate.
words.
what I'm saying is, like, innate is just something you're born with, right?
Elaborate.
So no is something you're born with. Mine is something you're born with. But to surrender is not.
No, it's absolutely unnatural.
It's completely unnatural. So it's not innate, right? So it's learned, okay. And even once it's learned, you're still gonna fail.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, even the master of surrendering is going to fail. I don't care who you are. You will unconsciously start trying to take things into your own hands, and have to remind yourself every single day
It's a choice, yeah.
and choose to do it.
And in terms of military, when you think of the word surrender, it's a bad word. Like, I'm not going to let go of this. This is, puff up your chest. I'm not surrendering. I think that it's odd. It's odd to think about surrendering in this context is victory.
Because it is 100%. And the other thing is, I look at surrendering and humility as a synonym in this situation. And obviously the opposite of humility is pride, which is probably the deadliest of all the sins, because it's so damn tricky. And it seeps into your life so many different ways. And you can plug up this hole and it'll come in over here. And then you'll plug up this one and it'll seep in over here. And even when you're trying to be humble, you can unconsciously be prideful and not even realize you're doing it. And I think that's why it's the deadliest, is because it's the trickiest. You know what I mean? And in my opinion, surrendering and humility is really, it's the same. You cannot surrender without being humble.
No, I would 100% agree.
You can't do it.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think, it's so hard, and why she said it so many times, because I think more than talking to us, you might have been talking to yourself.
What does surrender mean to you? What does that word and mean to you?
Yeah. Well, I love everything that you guys have said. I mean, yes and amen to what you're saying. I agree and echo all of that. I would say that we're all given time. We've all been given giftings by God. We've all been given resources by God. And if you just look at those three buckets, your time, talent, treasure is what, scripture says. Or, time, your giftings and your resources, everything that we have, my time right here with you guys, my time on this side of eternity, any giftings that he has given me, any resources that have been placed in my hand, any family member in relationship, any influence, all of that comes from him. Scripture tells us that any good thing that is in my world is of him. And so I freely give that back to him. So Scripture uses a lot of metaphors, but it often talks about like first fruits. And so my time, I wake up in the morning and he's getting the first of that. He's the one that gave it to me anyway. And that is me surrendering.
That's great.
My time to him, my talent to him, my treasure to him, my
Finances.
voice to him, my finances to him, everything.
All the gifts that he's giving you, turning back right over to him.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm allowing him to do what he wants to do with it. And what's beautiful is that he partners with us. He doesn't even have to do that. It's like, it's a pretty cool dance once you jump into it. He wants to partner with me. He wants to partner with you. He wants to partner with anybody who is saying yes to him to bring forth his kingdom. And, but it takes a consistent decision and choice. We have a choice. Like if we didn't have choice, it wouldn't be love. Like we have a choice to choose him. We have a choice to surrender. We have a choice to take our time, talent, treasure, resources, all the things, and point it back to us or point it back to furthering his kingdom.
And I think as you kind of described that, it surrenders in layers, and it's not a comprehensive term. You may have to surrender to specific things in your life, and this might cause people to kind of unpack the areas in their life where they're not surrendering.
Mm-hmm.
Are you not surrendering your finances? Like, you're not surrendering
your thoughts.
Your thoughts.
That's a big one.
It is.
Are you not surrendering your time? So it's like it's multi-layered. Yeah, we speak of it as in a comprehensive term, but even somebody who is surrendered to God might not have surrendered everything in their life and all other aspects.
That's why I said there's people who, the master of surrendering.
Yeah,
is still he's
still got more to surrender.
And you'll have to remind yourself over and over again.
So David in Scripture was called a man after God's own heart, right? And this is a man who, he's got quite the story. It's there's lots of scandal in his background.
Oh yeah.
And yet God still deemed him as a person after his own heart. But I love David's brokenness before God. And I think this is where we have to continue to be, where he is just saying, create in me a clean heart. Any crooked path that is in me, make it straight. That should be a declaration and a prayer for us every day. But that is evidence of a surrendered heart. It's just create me a clean heart. Whatever is in there, it's not supposed to be in there. Take it out. Anything that's crooked, anything that's not aligning with the mind of Christ, anything that's not aligning with your ways, straighten it out. That's ultimate surrender. And when I look at David and I study David, it's like, yeah, he really screwed some stuff up, just like each of us in this room have screwed some stuff up. But his heart was surrendered before the Lord.
Yeah. Devon, thank you so much. How about this? This might have been the longest one.
Oh gosh.
Don't you think?
Yeah, it's up. It's definitely.
And honestly, I could sit here another hour probably easily.
Absolutely.
This has been really good.
Yeah.
This is probably going to have to be like a part 2.
Yeah.
We're going to have Devon Hampson part 2.
two.
For sure.
Yeah.
Devon, thank you so much. I know this was a hard story to tell because I've had to tell mine, and clearly when I die, when it bleeds over onto me, I don't do very well. So, but
I'm proud of you. Yeah, it's good.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate it.
It's been an honor.
And we're thankful that you're at the Rock, and the work that you do. It just keep doing it.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what how this continues to morph. Your ministry continues to morph and change and progress.
Yeah.
Great.
Can I say one thing just about the local church, because I think it carries so many different connotations? Do you mind?
No.
I think when we're like, hey, get connected to a community, hey, get connected to a church, everyone's got backgrounds. And some people might think of church and they had a really bad experience in church, or some people might think of church and what they're thinking of. I know I keep hearing that. Like, what
Which
is
one
it?
Is it mine or yours?
I don't know. I'm just going to try to turn off all my notifications. I don't want to interrupt.
I think it's Andrew's. I'm pretty sure.
because this is important, so people need to listen to this.
But what I want to, I guess, challenge the people listening to is, ask God to reframe your thought process and reframe your heart around the local church. The church was God's idea. He knew it was needed. We're promised that the gates of hell will not prevail against the church. And the church isn't just a place that you go. Our pastor says it often. We are the church. Like he will always get up there and he will say, "Welcome to the building church." So we do go to a church service and things like that. But church is community. It is God's idea. It is on purpose and for a purpose, for when we're walking through things like this, that we are standing on each other's prayers, that we have people to lean on, that we are sitting under teachings that are ultimately going to help us reflect the heart of our Father and become more and more like Him. And I just want to make sure that I just felt like I needed to touch on that because the word church carries so many different connotations to people. So ask God to open your eyes to that and to open your spirit to really what His initial design for the local church is, because it's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.